We have been deadly wrong about Ötzi the Iceman. The oldest human mummy ever found is far more dangerous than anyone ever imagined.
He was found in a glacier, frozen in time for 5,000 years.
For 30 years, we believed we knew exactly who he was. A pale-skinned prehistoric hunter killed by a single arrow to the back. None of that is even close to the ugly truth. Not one single piece of it. In 2023, scientists resequenced his entire genome using technology that did not even exist when he was first studied. And what came back stunned every single one of them. His face was wrong. His death was wrong. Everything the world has believed about Otzi for 3 decades just collapsed in an instant. This is the real story of what actually happened to him and where he truly came from. The discovery and the man. Everyone thought they knew. The story of Otzi started in the worst way possible, honestly. The hikers who found him never saw a huge discovery. They saw a corpse, and for one terrifying second, they thought it belonged to someone's missing father. September 19th, 1991. Hikers Helmut and Erika Simon were coming down from Finale-Spitze in the Alps, right on the border between Austria and Italy. They wandered off the path a little. No big deal, right? Just 2 people enjoying a hike. Then Erika saw it, a head and shoulders jutting out of the melting ice like something clawing its way back up into the world. She thought it was a doll at first. Then her stomach dropped straight through the floor. That wasn't a doll, that was a body, face down, half buried in a rocky gully at 10,500 feet. And here's the thing. Nobody thought they had just stumbled upon something that would change history. Why would they? People die in these mountains every single year. Bodies get swallowed by snow and spit back out decades later. Frozen solid, faces still recognizable. This looked exactly like one of those. So, the rescue team did exactly what you do for a recent death. They didn't slow down. They didn't think. They grabbed jackhammers and pneumatic drills and went at the ice like they were demolishing a wall. And that's when they accidentally butchered Otzi's. A jackhammer ripped straight into his hip and his thigh, gouging into flesh that had sat untouched for over 5,000 years. 5,000 years, and they mutilated him in a single afternoon. His bow snapped clean in half because some rescuer grabbed it and used it as a prying stick. No clue it was a weapon older than written history itself. It wasn't aluminum, it was carved from yew wood. And his shoes weren't anything modern either. They were stuffed with grass to keep his feet warm. Think about that. No factories, no metal tools to cut anything precisely, just wood he shaped by hand and grass he packed in himself. And it worked well enough to keep him alive in brutal cold, at high altitude, for as long as he needed it to. When the hikers finally wrenched Otzi loose, they heard a crack. It was sharp, sickening, and honestly, frightening. Nobody thought much of it in the moment. Later, they figured out exactly what that sound had been. It was his arm bone. It had snapped like a dry branch, under the hands of people who genuinely thought they were helping him. And honestly, this next part should turn your stomach. While all this was happening, people kept showing up just to stare. Strangers with nothing better to do that afternoon, treating a 5,000-year-old corpse like a roadside attraction. Ugh, look at his face. Is that real? That's disgusting. Get a picture quick before they move him. That was the level of respect he got. Some of them stomped straight over tiny ancient tools half buried in the slush while they jostled for a better look. Some of them just picked things up off the ground and pocketed them. Walked off with 5,000-year-old evidence like it was a souvenir from a gift shop. And get this. It wasn't even only his grave getting disturbed that summer. It had been an unusually warm year, and other bodies were melting out of nearby glaciers around that exact same time. More recent deaths, climbers and hikers, swallowed by these mountains decades earlier. So, for a few chaotic days, nobody standing at that scene could say for sure whether they were looking at a 5,000-year-old corpse or somebody's missing father from the 1960s. It wasn't until the body finally reached a medical examiner that anyone understood what they'd actually torn out of that mountain. The copper axe gave it away. Real archaeologists knew right away that nobody had used tools like that in thousands of years. This wasn't a missing hiker. This was a man from the Copper Age, somewhere around 3,300 BCE.
The arrowhead was detected in 2001, and then the question was, did the arrowhead kill him or not?
They named him Otzi, after the valley he'd been torn from. And then the world went absolutely rabid for him. He became the oldest naturally preserved human mummy ever found in Europe. His clothes survived. His tools survived. His stomach still held food from his last meal, eaten less than an hour before he died. And that one detail alone made strangers feel like they were staring at someone who could have died yesterday instead of 5,000 years ago. Austria and Italy actually went to war over who got to claim him. Not a real war, but a real bitter dispute. The kind of thing you'd think only happens in movies. It got settled by measuring the exact spot where his corpse had been found, against the borderline. Italy won by 93 meters. 93 meters decided who got to own a 5,000-year-old dead man. By 2012, scientists thought they'd cracked him wide open. They sequenced his genome and spoke with total rock-solid confidence about everything they found. Brown eyes, lactose intolerant, type O blood. A mixed ancestry of early farmers and older hunter-gatherers, fitting neatly into the story the world already believed about how Europe came to be. So museums built him a face. They didn't do this randomly. They based it on the 2012 genome study, the one that said his ancestry was a mix of early farmers and older hunter-gatherer groups who'd already been living in Europe for thousands of years. Scientists at the time believed most prehistoric Europeans fit this same mixed pattern. So, when artists sat down to build his face, they used that assumption as their starting point, and they painted him to look like the kind of person they expected a mixed ancestry European farmer to look like. Pale skin, long wavy hair, a weathered hollow look, like a farmer worn down by one too many brutal harvests. They unveiled this face to the entire planet. A National Geographic editor went even further, saying people could finally look him in the eyes and recognize that he was really one of us.
So, I think that we can start now with the investigations.
One of us. Think about what they were actually claiming when they said that. They were telling millions of people, this is what your ancestor looked like. This is the actual truth, pulled straight from his bones and his blood. They would soon find out how badly wrong they were. And right on top of that face came a murder story, sold with that exact same iron confidence. There was an arrow buried in Otzi's back. He had a torn artery, defensive cuts slashed across his hands, DNA from 4 other people smeared across his gear. The story everyone repeated was simple and clean. He'd been ambushed in these mountains, and he bled out alone 5,000 years ago. End of story. Case closed. But this too was very wrong. And what actually happened to him was far worse than anyone standing in that museum could have imagined. So, that's where this whole thing began. A man dragged out of the ice by jackhammer, handed a face built on pure assumption, handed a history nobody had actually confirmed, and presented to the entire world as settled fact. And every single piece of it was sitting on a fault line, about to crack wide open.
That body would have been transported with the glacier down and destroyed completely.
The face that was never his. That face, you've seen it. Even if you don't think you have, you have. Pale skin, long, tangled hair, tired, hollow eyes staring out from behind museum glass. That was the face taught to millions of people for 30 straight years as the real Otzi. Newsflash, none of it was him. Not one single piece of it held up. In 2023, a team led by a scientist named Johannes Krause, working out of the Max Planck Institute in Germany, retested Otzi's DNA using methods roughly 8 times more detailed than anything available back in 2012. And when they dug into the genes controlling what someone actually looked like, skin, eyes, hair, the results didn't gently correct anything. They obliterated everything the public had been shown for 3 decades: his skin. Scientists now say Otzi almost certainly had dark skin. Not the pale, lightly tanned skin from every single reconstruction ever built. Genuinely dark skin, the kind tied to populations carrying extremely high levels of ancestry from early farmers who'd migrated out of what's now Turkey. And here's where this whole thing turns from a mistake into something far more disturbing. The actual mummy, the real body lying in that cold glass case in the museum, had dark skin the entire time. Anyone who walked up to that case and looked at him could see it with their own eyes. But scientists looked at that same dark skin for 30 straight years and told themselves a comforting little story instead, that the color was just decay, just damage from the ice and the mummification process eating away at him. They assumed his real skin must have been lighter underneath, hiding somewhere beneath what they were calling discoloration. They were wrong, dead wrong. The dark skin was him all along. Early European farmers, as a whole, were darker skinned than the Europeans who came after them. The pale skin everyone pictures when they imagine an ancient European actually developed later, which means the entire image the museum sold the world, the entire idea of what a prehistoric European ancestor should look like, was built backwards from the very start, not slightly off. Backwards, his eyes, dark brown, confirmed, which corrected an even earlier mistake, since the first reconstructions back in the 1990s gave him blue eyes. The world got his eye color wrong twice, not once, twice. And nobody noticed either time, not until someone finally checked. Then came the hair. And this is the detail that should genuinely humiliate every museum that ever displayed him. The new genetic data uncovered strong markers for male pattern baldness. Otzi was very likely significantly bald. And just like the skin, this wasn't some hidden secret buried deep in his DNA, waiting patiently to be discovered. The real mummy had no hair on his head. None. For 30 years. Scientists stood in front of that exact same evidence and assumed his hair must have simply rotted away over 5,000 years in the ice. Nobody stopped to ask if maybe, just maybe, there had never been much hair there to rot away in the first place. If they missed something a regular person could spot in 2 seconds just by looking at the real data, what else did they confidently get wrong, dead wrong, without a single person catching it? And there's one more thing buried inside his genes that nobody expected, and it has nothing to do with his face at all. Scientists found genetic markers showing he carried a higher risk for obesity and type 2 diabetes. Think about that for a second. A prehistoric hunter, climbing through brutal mountain terrain at over 10,000 feet, carrying genes that today get tied to modern junk food and modern couches. The only reason it never caught up with him in life was his relentless, grinding physical activity. His own body was working against him in ways nobody ever imagined, and his lifestyle was the only thing holding that door shut. And the worst of it? The part that should genuinely scare you hadn't even surfaced yet. The vanished people. This is where it stopped being about one man's stolen face and became something far bigger, far more disturbing, because it wasn't only Otzi who got erased here. It was his entire people, an entire population of human beings, wiped off the face of the earth, and almost nobody alive today even knows they existed. The old theory claimed Otzi's ancestry was a blend, some farmer heritage from people who'd migrated in from what's now Turkey, mixed together with older hunter-gatherer groups who'd already been roaming Europe for tens of thousands of years. That's the story that filled every textbook, slow, gradual mixing, stretched out peacefully across thousands of years. The 2023 retesting tore that theory to absolute shreds. Otzi carried almost no hunter-gatherer ancestry at all. He held one of the highest levels of pure farmer ancestry of any ancient European ever sequenced. Not a blend, practically untouched, practically pure. What that actually means is staggering once you really sit with it. Somewhere in these mountains, a group of people stayed almost completely sealed off from everyone around them. No mixing, no blending in, for thousands of years, while the rest of Europe slowly merged together into one shared human story. Otzi's people stayed locked inside their own isolated genetic cage, cut off from the world by walls of ice and rock. And then came the gut punch. They vanished. Not faded slowly into everyone else, vanished, gone. Modern people living in those exact same mountains today carry almost none of that same ancestry. Whatever Otzi's people were, they're erased from the record entirely. The only proof they'd ever existed at all is one frozen corpse, preserved by sheer blind luck. If the wind had buried him just 10 feet to the left, in ground that later thawed and scattered his remains across the rock, there might be zero evidence these people had ever lived. So, what actually happened to them? This is where it turns genuinely dark. Around 5,000 years ago, a new group of people started pushing into Europe. They came from the steppe regions far to the east, what's now Ukraine and Russia, and they belonged to something called the Yamnaya culture. For a long time, scientists described what happened next gently. They called it migration. They called it mixing. They called it cultural blending. Soft words for something that was never soft at all. Here's what some of the leading researchers in the field actually believe now. One archaeologist who has spent years studying this exact period said flatly that he's become increasingly convinced this wasn't peaceful, not even close. He believes the Yamnaya didn't simply move in and blend with the farmers already living there. He believes they wiped them out. A kind of genocide. Here's the evidence he points to. Right around the time the Yamnaya arrived, the way local people buried their dead suddenly changed overnight. Like the old customs simply got erased along with the people who practiced them. At the same time, graves start showing up packed with weapons, the kind built specifically for killing other people, not hunting animals, suggesting a class of dedicated fighters had suddenly appeared where none existed before. And skeletons from this exact window of time show a sharp spike in violent deaths. Bones with blunt force trauma. Bones with wounds that don't come from accidents. Then came the DNA, and this is the detail that seals it completely. Scientists looked at the Y chromosome, the genetic material that only gets passed from father to son. And here's what they found. Among modern Europeans carrying this steppe ancestry, almost every single one of those Y chromosomes traces back to Yamnaya men specifically, not to the farmers who'd been living in Europe before them. Meanwhile, the female genetic line tells a completely different story. It shows plenty of ancestry from the original European farmer women. There's only one explanation that fits both halves of that picture together. The Yamnaya men killed the farmer men, who were already living there, in huge numbers, and took the farmer women into their own population afterward, whether those women had any say in it or not. And Otzi died right on the edge of it. His people were still alive when he died, still untouched, still isolated, sealed away in their mountains. And this wave of violence hadn't reached them yet. He died only a short time before it would have. He never saw it coming, and neither did anyone else around him. So, that frozen body in the museum case isn't just a murdered man anymore. It's the last surviving proof that an entire isolated people ever existed at all, right before they were almost certainly slaughtered by whoever came through next. And somehow, Otzi's own death gets even darker from here. The body that was already dying. This is the part of the story that might be the most disturbing of all, because this isn't only about who killed Otzi anymore. It's about how many different things were trying to take his life, all at the exact same time. He wasn't just murdered, he was being torn apart from every direction at once, and he likely had no idea about most of it. Let's start with the moment everyone already knows about. Someone shot him from behind with an arrow. The arrowhead drove in beneath his left shoulder blade and ripped straight through his subclavian artery, one of the major blood vessels feeding his heart. That kind of wound bleeds out fast. He likely died within minutes. For years, that's where the story stopped. Shot in the back, bled out. End of story. But the new genetic data uncovered something the old studies could never have seen. Otzi's genome carried what scientists call a high genetic load, a clear sign of a small population that had been isolated and inbreeding for generations. It matched exactly what we just found out about his people. They'd been cut off from everyone else. sealed away in those mountains, breeding within their own small circle for generation after generation. And that changes everything about how his death. In a community that small and that sealed off, almost everyone was probably related to everyone else in some way, which means whoever killed Otzi probably wasn't some stranger from a distant tribe. It was probably someone close to him, someone who shared his blood. This may have been someone he recognized the second he saw their face. And there's more evidence backing up the idea that this wasn't sudden at all. A partially healed knife wound sat on his hand, from a fight that had happened days before he died. Not minutes before, days. Which means he'd already clashed violently with someone earlier that week, and whoever he'd fought may have come hunting for him afterward. So, this might not have been an ambush at all. It might have been a manhunt, someone tracking him through the mountains for days, finally cornering him in the gully where he died. He had time to know someone was coming for him, time to feel hunted before they finally caught him. And here's where it turns even more horrifying, because the arrow and the manhunt weren't even the only things killing him. Scientists found an active strain of a stomach bacteria called Helicobacter pylori inside him, and his body had already started fighting it. His immune system had detected the infection and was actively battling it the moment he died, which means that in his final days, while someone may have been stalking him through these mountains, his own stomach might have been in real, gnawing pain, inflamed, burning. He may have been sick and weakened in the days leading up to his death, on top of everything else closing in on him from every side, and one more detail lands like a punch straight to the chest. Blood from 4 different people turned up on his gear, 2 samples on his arrowhead, 1 on his knife, and 1 more smeared across the back of his coat. Researchers believe that blood on his coat might mean he was carrying someone, a wounded companion on his back in his final hour, while he himself was being hunted, bleeding, and possibly sick, exhausted. In real pain from an infection his own body was fighting, carrying another wounded person on his back, being hunted by someone who might have shared his blood. And he still made it as far as he did before that arrow finally caught him. Then comes the detail that ties the whole horror together with the darkest twist of all. The 2023 testing confirmed his risk for heart disease was far higher than scientists had thought back in 2012. Genetically, his heart was already failing him. He was in his mid-40s, old for his time, strong enough to survive at high altitude, tough enough to function in some of the harshest terrain on Earth. But his heart, on a genetic level, was already a ticking clock counting down to 0, which means even if that arrow had missed him completely, even if whoever was hunting him had given up and walked away, his own body might have killed him within a few years regardless. He never even needed a killer. His own heart had been working against him the entire time, silently, with 0 symptoms he could ever feel, long before anyone ever drew that bow. Death came at him from every direction at once. He never stood a chance, arrow or no arrow.